Well, the coronavirus is affecting the Jewish community just like everyone else. Jewish schools are ending the term early on Monday, and people are planning how to observe Passover next month while limiting exposure to COVID-19. Now, the South African Board of Jewish Education says 2 parents of pupils in Johannesburg have tested positive and 1 pupil in Cape Town. Now, the National Director of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, Wendy Khan, joining us via Skype to discuss the impact of this virus on the community. Wendy, good evening, and thank you so much for your time. So I see here that with the South African Board of Jewish Educators meeting earlier this week and saying that you're going to be closing schools. Is it only for a week? Just to clarify for us.
Yeah, I think that it's a little bit outdated. This was a discussion that was held on Sunday, and it was decided on Sunday that the Jewish schools would be closing well, at that stage it was for a week, but since then our president has declared that all of the schools will be closing until after Easter, and our schools also will be waiting till then, and then we'll have to reevaluate and make decisions going forward.
All right, so what other measures is the community putting in place, especially with the Passover on the way? I think that the date is the 8th of April. How are you going to manage that, especially with gatherings and prayers and things?
Yeah, we had a very painful decision today in the Jewish community. It was decided and communicated by the chief rabbi that our synagogues are going to be closing. And that is just a very, very difficult thing for Jewish people. We pray 3 times a day, early in the morning, in the evening, and at night. And for many people, that's their way of life. And we're very community-oriented people, and the fact that on our Sabbath we will no longer be going to our synagogues and having to pray at home, it's a very, very difficult thing, and our community, I think, is feeling, just like all South Africans, even more heartbroken about what is going on globally and certainly in our country. And the stories are just awful that we are hearing. I've just listened to the students from the university. The impact on all communities is so extensive. Our own community also, we've had to make decisions in terms of celebrations, weddings, bat mitzvahs, bar mitzvahs. All of these celebrations are now, many of them have been cancelled, many of them have been postponed, even things like funerals, for example, we need to find ways that we can limit them to as small as possible. We have to do everything in our power to make sure that this virus does not spread more than it really has to, and I think every community needs to take that responsibility, and our community is certainly playing our part.
So what is the exact advice you've given to the community, especially during these particular celebrations? Are they just to celebrate or observe them with just their immediate family in their homes and not get together with other relatives?
Well, as I mentioned, we will no longer be going to synagogue, so the prayers will be done at home alone. And our community has big, festive, family-oriented Pesach meals, and of course they're educational, and it's really one of the highlights of our Jewish calendar. And this year, yes, we will be limiting the numbers. The other area that we're looking at is trying to not bring children into the proximity of adults. We know of elderly people. That's something else that we as a community are going to need to find ways around. It's going to be a very sad Passover this year, but I suppose it's going to be a sad Easter, and every community is going to have to find ways to get through this and to keep our sanity and to keep our humour and wherever possible to look after the people around us, because we're very worried not just about the Jewish community but about the impact that this is having on all South Africans, because this is a South African problem and we need to find South African solutions.
Indeed, and a global one at that, Wendy. So are there any restrictions? I mean, in the event, like we say, you know of a few cases there of parents and then pupils who've tested positive as well from the Jewish community. Are there restrictions? Would quarantine, be a problem? Are there specific conditions that this must be done under for these people?
We have gone on a massive campaign within our community to stress the importance of self-quarantine and to make sure that people who have traveled from overseas or people who have come into contact with somebody with COVID-19 are maintaining strict self-quarantine conditions. We've actually set up an online platform within the Jewish community on an educational level to explain why this is so important and how people should go about doing this, the self-quarantine, and how children should be included in self-quarantine, because they are really, they can be carriers and quite, and because you don't know that they're asymptomatic, which makes it even more dangerous. So we really have gone on a campaign. We have regular YouTubes coming out on issues that are becoming important as we go, because it's a fluid process, and it's an ongoing process, and we need to make sure that communication and education is happening constantly.
And Wendy, what about the rules? And I know when it comes to the Sabbath and travel and leaving your home and not using, electronic devices and all of that. What if somebody gets sick on a Friday night? What if you have to use the phone? Somebody has to go to hospital. How would you work? Do we just put those rules aside, the religious rules, for the rules not to deal with this virus?
Yeah, when it comes to saving a life, we will do anything, and whether it means breaking the Sabbath, using the telephone, that's absolutely not a problem. But I think what makes it complex for us, the Sabbath and Passover coming up, is that we can't use social media, and we can't use facilities like Skype and Zoom, which the community is using extensively now, both in terms of our religious learning, in terms of our schools. Our children are learning through these mechanisms, the technology, and also from a work perspective, we're using them extensively. So we need to find ways as much as possible to use technology and to stop human contact as much as possible, direct human contact. But at the same time, on these Sabbaths, we don't have the access to that, which makes it quite a lonely solo experience.
All right, thanks very much for that. We wish you all the best. Wendy Khan, South African Jewish Board of Deputies.